I think what helped as well was the fact that television broadcast began to become prevalent, and the images of unarmed black people being attacked by white mobs certainly helped Dr. King's movement. Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Uh, when I'm probably getting ahead of you, but with this march in Selma to Montgomery, when people like John Lewis, Amelia Boynton, and others were beaten because of their of them wanting to do their civil rights, and that's march from point A to point B. In this court case was Selma to Montgomery, you know, and they were not fighting back. They were not, tearing up stuff. They were just simply marching. And when people across this nation saw those images on television, you know, then it touched their hearts. Those who had hearts, and of course there was many who saw that and said, "Well, they got what they deserved." But there was some good-hearted people, some blacks that were certainly for that and a part of it. But there were also some whites at the highest level of our government, including the president of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, at the time, who saw that and said, this has to change. This is not America. This is not, equality. This is not justice. And so, and there were, like I said, a lot of white sisters and brothers who saw the same images, and it touched their hearts and said that something has to change.
Well, to some extent, you've already touched on this. The March on Washington, do you think it made up? How big of an impact do you think the March on Washington made within the civil rights
Yeah.
movement?
Well, it's so huge of an impact that it's hard to just really say in words that the impact that it had, because it's still we still talk about that today. We still use that as an example of how people coming together can make change, and we use that as a model, of how we can make changes in America through nonviolence. So the march was so important, and if that march had not taken place, and if those 250,000 people had not shown up, you know, it would have been a further setback. But people came any way they could, by bus, by car, by train, and a few came by plane. But most people were on buses, didn't have a place to stay. They just camped out wherever. But they wanted to be there to be a part of something that was larger than themselves. And for those who were able to be there and be a part of it, I mean, I salute them, and they certainly made a mark in history of America. I would say probably in the history of the world.
Yeah, and there was a fair number of whites among, I mean, in the audience as well.
Right.
Just looking at the speech, looking at the audience, I mean, you can really see that a significant number of white people were there. I mean, I wouldn't say that. Well, I'm not sure that they were all there to support the movement, but I'm sure that a good number of them were.
Yeah, well, I'm quite sure there were some just curiosity onlookers to see what was going to happen, but the white brothers and sisters, for the most part, those that were there to support the movement, to support Dr. King, and uh, they were not there just to again, for the most part, were not there just to be there. They were there to make a statement that says, we can join together as black and white, and let America know that we are better than what had been happening throughout the 50s, and of course in the beginning of the 60s. And I salute those individuals, both black and white, and other races that were there to support this movement.
Well, at one point during his career, Dr. King left Atlanta and went to Birmingham, Alabama. He was there to protest the treatment of black people in that city. A group of clergymen uh, opposed his presence in Birmingham, on the basis that it was his actions were unwise and untimely. And his response to them, of course, was his letter from Birmingham jail. Uh, First, do you think they were justified in their criticisms of Dr. King?
No, they were not. And the clergy who wrote those letters, and okay, to answer your basic question, no, they were not justified because Dr. King was there to lift up those individuals had been downtrodden, the poor, the downtrodden, those who were being beaten by by water holes, those who were had dogs sicked on them. He was there to uplift those people, and he was not an outsider. He was coming there to help those individuals. Now there were criticism, from the people who the whites that he specifically addressed the letter to, but also there were blacks who criticized him as well for his actions there, as kind of still coming in, causing some trouble. But again, the overwhelming majority of the people were there to, that were there to support him, especially the young folks who there were the students in the school, high school, that skipped school and, didn't tell their parents that they were going to protest and end up getting arrested and thrown in jail. And then, there were those who prepared for that because they brought their little knapsack, little toothbrush, toothpaste, and a little snack because they knew they were not going to get anything when they were arrested. So, they came prepared, to be arrested. And again, that's what had an impact on the civil rights movement and an impact on what Bull Connor was doing to those innocent individuals, children that were.
Would you like our audience know who Bull Connor was?
Bull Connor at that time was the chief of police up in Birmingham there, and he was the one that caused the dogs. And again, back then, if you're the chief of police or sheriff in a city, a sheriff in a county or chief of police, your word was, it was final. And so when he said, turn the dogs loose on them, the police officer, which, they were all white, had no problem doing that. And so Bull Connor, he was a mean person, to put it that light. He was mean and prejudiced and racist police law enforcement officer,
Okay, but in his response in his letter from Birmingham jail, well, in my opinion, just his very well after the opening, after his greeting to those he was responding to the clergyman, the very first thing he said was, "I am in Birmingham because injustice is here." For me, if he hadn't said anything else after that, that would have been enough. To me, that was argument enough. A good argument enough for him to be there.
Right.
So, but of course, he went on, at length, talking about, the different things, just laws and unjust laws, and how people have the moral right to disobey unjust laws and things like that. But in any event, in that same letter, he expressed disappointment uh, in those he referred to as the white moderate. What did you think he meant by that?
Well, let me go back to address one thing. Back then, particular southern states, you know, they believed that they could take care of their own problems, their own issues, and therefore they believed that they could take care of their issues of racism, which uh, some of the clergy probably saw it, but they just did not admit to it. Just like even today, with some of the evangelicals that support what people like Donald Trump is saying and doing, even though they know scripturally it's wrong, but they will not speak out against it. So what I'm trying to say is back then, people believed that they could take care of their own problem and didn't need anyone else to tell them how to uh, 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 take care of their issues in their communities. Now, I'm going to ask you to repeat the other portion of the question again because I've kind of forgotten what that was.
Yes, he expressed disappointment in those he referred to as the white moderate.
Yeah,
My sense is he was referring to whites who supported the civil rights movement, and he probably thought that they weren't
yeah,
doing enough. But that's just speculation on my part. But what
yeah.
did you think he meant by
Yeah.
he had
Oh,
been disappointed with the white moderate?
well, absolutely. There were whites uh, who knew and saw that what was happening was wrong,